Hey there, students. Thank you for being part of this presentation. My name is Luis Silva, and our focus for today is World History, the Treaty of Versailles. What will we learn today? Today we are going to explain the major decisions made in the Versailles Treaty, including German reparations and the mandate system that replaced Ottoman control. Let's move on. World War I was fought between the Allies and the Central Powers from the years 1914 all the way to the year 1918. On November 11th, 1918, the German government agreed to an armistice and World War I came to an end. As you can see from the picture to the left, you have all of the newspapers basically letting the world know that Germany had surrendered and that the war was over. People are glad because this was one of the most brutal conflicts the world had experienced up to that point. About 8.5 million soldiers and about 13 million civilians died as a result of the war. You can see to the right hand side basically battlefield death of the big countries that participated. For example, you have the United States with about 116,000 casualties. And this is, remember, the United States got or participated in this war basically very late, almost towards the end. You have Germany with 1.8 million deaths. You have Russia with 1.7, France with 1.3, Austria-Hungary with about 1.2, the British Empire with about a little bit more than 900,000. You have Italy with about 650,000, and you also have the Ottoman Empire with a little bit more than 300,000, to be exact, 325,000. These are the casualties. These are the result of participating in such a destructive conflict. Here we have some images that reflect the destruction and the death of World War I. This was an unnecessary war that was fought basically over nothing. Here we have another sad, tragic picture of death, something that did not have to happen, but unfortunately the world did not learn from World War I, and it basically started World War II 20 years after the end of this conflict. It is believed that about 21 million soldiers were wounded during this war, and the images speak for themselves. You see the image to the right, very sad. This is a reality of World War I. You see the image to the left. You see the same sad story that became part of World War I. Words cannot describe the horrific outcome of this particular conflict in the lives of civilians as well as military personnel that were part of this war. Homes, farms, towns were destroyed. The war cost $338 billion and most national treasuries were empty. By the way, if we look at these numbers today, $338 billion, it's basically nothing versus today's money. But at this particular time, this was tremendous, enormous amounts of money that were spent just to fight this war. And you see here total desolation, total destruction, and it was for nothing. Here we have more images of how cities were completely destroyed. Again, this is the outcome of this conflict that brought nothing either to Germany or France or Great Britain, Russia, but complete destruction. In 1919, representatives from 32 nations attended the Paris Conference to write a treaty to end the war. The conference was led by the Big Four, Britain, France, Italy, as well as the United States. Here you have an image here, picture of basically the Big Four. You have U.S. President Woodrow Wilson. You also have Italian Prime Minister Vittorio Orlando. You also have French Premier Georges Clemenceau. And you also have Prime Minister David Lloyd George from Great Britain. Neither Germany nor any of the Central Powers were allowed to attend. Russia could not attend because they had left basically World War I. Remember, they signed a peace treaty with Germany and they basically exited the war. Creating a treaty would not be easy because the major powers had different agendas. Again, here you have the Big Four, the British Prime Minister, the Italian Prime Minister, the French Premier, as well as US President Woodrow Wilson. Britain and France wanted to weaken Germany so it could never go to war again. Britain and France wanted Germany to also accept full blame, pay reparations, and lose all of their overseas colonies. United States President Woodrow Wilson disagreed with that. He felt that these harsh punishments for Germany were not necessary. President Wilson presented his own peace proposal known as the 14 points. And here are President Wilson's 14 points in 1918. You can pause this video to read carefully the first 5 points, but let's summarize what they say basically. Points 1 through 5, Wilson hoped to eliminate the causes of World War I and called for an end to secret treaties, alliances. He also called for freedom of the seas, eliminating imperial colonies, as well as reducing national militaries. Very important points. Unfortunately, many of the people that attended this conference did not agree with President Wilson. And here are points 6 through 13. Again, you're more than welcome to pause this video so you can read each of them. But this is basically a summary of points 6 through 13. Point 6 through 13, President Wilson suggested changing national boundaries, creating new nations, and allowing self-determination so that the people of each nation could decide their own form of government. Very important points. Again, many of these points were rejected basically by the other nations basically that became part of this conference. Now, point 14 is very important, and basically this is what it's saying, that Wilson wanted to create a League of Nations. Very important points that unfortunately many of them did not become a reality. President Wilson wanted to create the League of Nations, and that would give all nations an opportunity to work out their grievances without resorting to war. Wilson hoped that a League of Nations could peacefully negotiate solutions to any future conflict. But Britain and France disagreed with many of the 14 points, so Woodrow Wilson had to compromise. These compromises led to an agreement known as the Treaty of Versailles. And here are the major provisions of the Versailles Treaty, which included, once again, a League of Nations that would serve as an international organization to keep peace among countries. You're more than welcome to pause this video so you can read all the major provisions carefully. The League of Nations Covenant included an agreement that all member nations would work together to stop future acts of aggression. The League of Nations also included a court of international justice to settle disagreements. Now, Germany had to give up land in Europe and all of its overseas colonies. The German military was reduced to about 100,000 troops, 6 warships, no submarines. It could not manufacture war equipment. Germany was not very happy about this, as we're going to see in the following years, during the 1920s, 1930s, and then all the way to the Second War. Now, Germany was forced to sign the War Guilt Clause, accepting all blame for the war, and paid 33 billion in reparations to the Allies. Now, this basically broke Germany. It was already a mess, but this completely broke Germany, and also this War Guilt Clause was responsible or contributed in a way to the rise of dictators such as Hitler in Germany. In addition, the Treaty of Versailles redrew the map of Europe and of the Middle East. As you can see here to the left, you have Europe and the Middle East in 1915. And then you have Europe in 1919, you see it's a completely different map. Things change, boundaries change, leaders changed, and it's a sad situation because this did not have to happen. Now, Europe and the Middle East were not really happy with the decisions that were made in 1919, and they resented everything that was taking place that ultimately contributed to World War II. It is important for you to know that Central Europe was redrawn to reduce the power of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Land was taken from Germany to create Poland. The German-French borders were demilitarized to avoid future invasions. New nations were created from territories that Russia gave up when it left the war early. Ottoman Empire was divided. Britain and France gained mandates in the Middle East. The mandates gave Britain and France control over oil resources in the Middle East. On June 28, 1919, Germany and the major Allied powers signed the Treaty of Versailles, and World War I officially came to an end. Most nations celebrated the official end of World War I. As you can see here from this newspaper headlines, the world was very happy that this conflict was finally over. While the world was celebrating the signing of the Treaty of Versailles, the Germans protested the harsh terms and resented the government for signing the Treaty of Versailles. In the United States, reactions to the Treaty of Versailles were mixed. According to the U.S. Constitution, only the Senate can approve treaties. Many senators fear that signing the Treaty of Versailles and joining the League of Nations would force America to become involved in future wars. If you can see here from the political cartoons, the Senate did not want the U.S. to be part of any future conflicts, and therefore they were not happy with this particular component of the Treaty of Versailles. As a result, the United States never signed the treaty or joined the League of Nations, which is very sad because remember, a lot of the components, a lot of the parts of the Treaty of Versailles were basically President Wilson's ideas. Basically, the Senate rejected Mr. Wilson's ideas and rejected what the world had proposed as well. Ironically, the League of Nations that became part of the world because of President Wilson was rejected by the United States Senate. And here we have basically the members of the League of Nations during this particular time period. They include basically all the areas that are marked in black. You see a lot of the countries basically of the world that became part of this treaty except the United States. World War I was the largest war the world had yet seen, and it changed the way future wars were fought. Nations used total war tactics to commit all their resources to winning. Drafted soldiers, ration, as well as using propaganda. New war technologies increased the rates of death and destruction to unprecedented levels. The war changed expectations for women and led to voting rights for women in many nations. This also includes the United States. 22 million soldiers and civilians died in the war. An entire generation of Europeans was killed. Many places in Europe were completely destroyed. And also, the war devastated the economies of European nations who had little money to rebuild and few jobs to offer its citizens. Once again, you have to the right images that shows you how destructive this war was in terms of death as well as destruction in the cities. Now, the terms of the Versailles Treaty caused problems and bitterness in many nations, especially in Germany. The Treaty of Versailles was said to be a peace built on quicksand. Very true. The treaty did not address the main causes of World War I. Remember, by the main causes we mean militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism. Also, the League of Nations did not include the US, and its leaders would do anything to avoid another war. Also, high unemployment and desire for revenge would lead to aggressive dictators in the 1920s as well as the 1930s. You're more than welcome to read the immediate effects of World War I and the long-term effects of World War I to the right side of your presentation if you want to pause this video. These are some of the effects. You see to the left, you see Adolf Hitler, and you see to the right, you see Benito Mussolini. Brutal dictators. Now we have come to the end of this presentation. Please do not forget to subscribe, and I will see you in the next presentation.